Emily adjusted the strap of her silver dress as she stepped into the glowing ballroom. The music was soft, laughter filled the air, and crystal chandeliers threw golden light across the crowd. It should have been a perfect evening, but something inside her felt heavy. She and Daniel had arrived together, yet it felt as if they were miles apart. For the last few months, their marriage had been quiet, not in the peaceful way, but in that kind of silence where words go missing and feelings fade quietly. Daniel had been working long hours at his company, coming home late and always tired. Emily understood his stress, but what hurt most was how he had stopped looking at her the way he used to. Once, his eyes would light up when she entered a room. Now, they barely met hers. She told herself it was just a phase, that every marriage had its slow seasons. Still, the ache of being unseen had started to settle deep in her heart. She smiled politely at a couple passing by and moved toward the punch table, trying to shake off the thoughts. This night was supposed to be fun, Daniel's company's annual party, full of friends, coworkers, and laughter. But as she turned to scan the room, her eyes landed on Daniel standing across the hall. He looked sharp in his navy suit, talking animatedly with a woman from his department. The woman laughed, touching his arm lightly. And Daniel smiled back in that charming, easy way Emily remembered so well. A strange feeling rushed through her. Not anger, not jealousy, but a quiet sadness. It wasn't about the woman. It was about what they'd lost. She missed being the person he looked at that way. She missed being part of his world, not just watching him from a distance. She took a deep breath, pretending to adjust her bracelet, hoping no one noticed her expression. She told herself not to overthink. Maybe it was just harmless conversation, but her heart whispered something else, something fragile and fearful. She decided to step out for a moment, away from the noise. The soft hum of the music and chatter made it easy to slip through unnoticed. As she moved toward the large window overlooking the city, she caught a glimpse of herself in the glass, elegant, calm, and perfectly put together. Yet behind that reflection, she saw the truth. A woman trying to hold her emotions steady. The city lights stretched endlessly outside, glittering like tiny promises she wasn't sure she could still believe in. 7 years ago, Daniel had proposed to her under those same stars, vowing that their love would never fade. And for a long time, he kept that promise. He used to surprise her with flowers, cook dinner when she was tired, or hold her close when words weren't enough. But somewhere along the line, life had gotten louder, and love had gotten quieter. Emily sighed and turned back toward the crowd. Daniel was no longer standing with that woman. He was now speaking to a group of colleagues. She noticed how confidently he spoke, how everyone around him laughed easily. It was one of the reasons she'd fallen for him, his warmth, his energy, his charm. She just wished she still had a place in that part of his world. She walked to a nearby table and set down her drink. Her friend Claire appeared beside her with a friendly smile. "You look lost," Claire teased softly. "Maybe a little," Emily replied. Claire leaned closer. "You and Daniel, okay?" Emily hesitated. "We're fine. Just busy." Claire nodded knowingly. Sometimes being busy is the easiest way to forget to talk. Her words hit deeper than Emily expected. She smiled faintly, trying to brush it off, but she couldn't deny how true it felt. Before she could answer, the music shifted. The host's voice echoed through the speakers, asking everyone to gather near the stage for a toast. Emily followed the crowd, blending into the sea of laughter and movement. She found Daniel standing near the front, glass in hand. Their eyes met briefly across the room. His gaze lingered for a moment, unreadable, searching, maybe even nervous, before he turned back to the stage. Something about that look made her heart race. The host spoke for a moment, thanking everyone for their hard work and dedication. Then, to Emily's surprise, Daniel stepped forward. He wasn't supposed to speak tonight. He hadn't mentioned anything to her. Murmurs filled the room as people turned their attention to him. "I'd like to say something," Daniel said, his voice calm but steady. Emily froze. He didn't usually like surprises, especially public ones. What was he doing? Daniel looked around the room, his expression thoughtful. "Tonight isn't just about work or success," he began. "It's about the people who make it all worth it." The crowd listened quietly, expecting another polite corporate speech. But Emily felt a strange shift in his tone. It wasn't the confident, practiced voice he used at meetings. This was softer, real. He paused, then looked straight at her. Their eyes met again, and this time she felt something stir. A tension, a question, maybe even hope. But Daniel didn't say more. Instead, he smiled faintly and lifted his glass. "To the people who remind us why we do what we do, and to never forgetting what truly matters." Oh. The crowd cheered, raising their glasses. Emily clapped along, still unsure what to make of it. Daniel's words sounded simple, but the way he looked at her made it feel like there was more behind them. Something unspoken as the music started again and people returned to the dance floor. Emily found herself standing still. The night suddenly felt heavier and brighter all at once. She couldn't tell what Daniel was thinking, but his expression lingered in her mind. When he finally walked over to her, her breath caught. "You've disappeared for a while," he said softly. "Just needed some air," she replied, her voice quiet. He nodded, looking down for a moment. Then, with that same unreadable look in his eyes, he said, "Stay close tonight, okay?" Before she could answer, someone called his name from across the room, and he stepped away again, leaving her with that half-finished sentence echoing inside her. Emily watched him go, her heart caught between confusion and curiosity. Something about the way he spoke, the slight hesitation, the flicker of emotion made her wonder if maybe, just maybe, something was about to change between them. She didn't know it yet, but before the night ended, Daniel would do something she would never forget, something that would test her heart, surprise everyone in the room, and remind her what love could still become when given one more chance. Emily stepped out onto the balcony, leaving behind the noise of the ballroom. The night air felt cool against her skin, brushing away the warmth of the crowded room. The city lights stretched endlessly below, and for the first time that evening, she could breathe. Inside, everything felt too loud. The laughter, the music, the sparkle of other people's happiness. Out here, it was quiet enough to hear her own thoughts. She leaned against the railing, watching cars move like tiny sparks on the streets below. She didn't want to admit it, but she felt lonely. Being surrounded by hundreds of people and still feeling invisible was a strange kind of pain. Daniel had been kind, polite, even attentive in small ways, but the connection between them wasn't there anymore. It was as if they were acting like a couple in public, but living like roommates in private. She couldn't remember the last time he had looked at her like he used to, with that easy warmth that made her feel seen, trying to escape. A voice said softly. Emily turned to see her friend Claire stepping onto the balcony, holding a glass of sparkling water. Claire smiled gently. "I saw you sneak out." Emily gave a small smile. "You caught me." Claire leaned beside her on the railing. "You okay?" "I don't know," Emily said honestly. "I guess I just needed a break. It's been strange lately with Daniel." Claire asked, her tone kind, not nosy. Emily sighed. "Yeah, we don't fight or anything. We just don't talk like we used to. It's like we live next to each other, not with each other." Claire nodded slowly. "That's what happens when love gets too quiet. You start to forget the sound of it." Emily looked down at her glass, the reflection of city lights dancing on its surface. "I keep wondering if he even notices. Sometimes I think he's happier at work than at home." "You've both been under pressure," Claire said softly. "Maybe tonight is the start of fixing it." Emily smiled weakly. "Maybe." They stood there for a few moments, listening to the faint echo of music drifting through the open doors. Then Claire's phone buzzed, and she excused herself with a hug. "Come back in soon," she said. "You look too beautiful to be hiding." When Emily turned back toward the ballroom, she saw Daniel through the glass. He was near the stage now, laughing with a group of coworkers. There was a light in his eyes, the confident, easy one she fell for years ago. Watching him from afar stirred something deep inside her. Not jealousy, but longing. She missed being part of that version of him, the man who used to tell her everything. who couldn't wait to share the little moments of his day. Now he shared them with everyone but her. A few minutes later, the host's voice boomed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. It's time for a special toast." The crowd started gathering near the stage again, laughter fading into soft murmurs. Emily slipped back inside, standing near the back. She spotted Daniel near the front, talking to the host. He looked unusually serious, his shoulders straight, his face calm. The host handed him a microphone, smiling. "Daniel has something he wants to say tonight." Emily blinked in surprise. He hadn't mentioned anything about his speech. Daniel wasn't the kind of man who liked surprises or attention. The guests turned toward him, the chatter fading into expectant silence. He cleared his throat, his eyes scanning the room. "I know we've all had a busy year," he began. "We've worked hard, lost sleep, and done everything we could to make this company what it is. But tonight, I want to talk about something different." People exchanged curious looks. Emily felt her stomach tighten. His voice was steady, but there was a quiet emotion underneath it. "I realized recently," Daniel continued, "that success doesn't mean much if you forget why you started chasing it. Sometimes, in trying to be the best, we end up losing sight of the people who gave us the strength to keep going." His words hung heavy in the air. Emily's breath slowed. Something about the way he spoke, not rehearsed, not corporate, felt deeply personal. He looked around, then his gaze found hers across the room. "There's someone here tonight who's reminded me of that," he said, his voice softening. "Someone who stood beside me through everything, every late night, every failure, every silent dinner where I was too tired to say what I felt." Emily's chest tightened. She didn't move, afraid that if she did, the moment would break. The crowd had gone completely silent, eyes following Daniel as he spoke. "I've been so focused on building a future," he went on, "that I forgot to take care of the person who's always been my home." A few people smiled softly. Some whispered to each other, realizing who he meant. Emily felt her heart racing. She wanted to look away, but couldn't. Daniel's eyes stayed on her, steady and full of something she hadn't seen in a long time. Regret and love all mixed together. "I don't say this enough," he said, "but I'm grateful more than words can ever explain. Tonight, I want to fix that." The host smiled, clearly moved. "Well, I think that deserves a toast," he said cheerfully, raising his glass. The crowd followed, clinking glasses and cheering softly. But Daniel didn't join the toast right away. He set his glass down and stepped away from the microphone, walking slowly toward Emily. The crowd turned to follow him, whispers spreading. Emily's pulse quickened. She hadn't expected any of this. The man who had barely spoken to her all week was now walking toward her in front of everyone. He stopped just a few steps away, his voice quiet now. "Emily," he said, just loud enough for the nearby guests to hear, "I've made mistakes. I stopped showing you how much you mean to me. But if you'll let me, I want to start again." Emily's throat tightened. Her eyes burned with tears she tried to hold back. She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, another voice broke the silence. "Daniel," someone said softly from behind him. It was the woman from earlier, the one he'd been laughing with. She looked uncertain, almost nervous. "Are you sure about this?" The room froze. The soft hum of the background music seemed to disappear completely. Emily's heart sank, her chest heavy with confusion. The crowd looked between Daniel and the woman, unsure what was happening. Daniel turned to face her, calm but serious. "Yes," he said firmly. Then he turned back to Emily, eyes steady, expression full of meaning. But Emily could barely breathe. The moment that had felt like a fairy tale seconds ago now felt tangled with questions. Who was this woman? Why did she sound like she knew something? The guests exchanged quiet whispers. The host tried to smile, pretending everything was fine. But the energy in the room had shifted. Emily stood frozen, staring at Daniel, waiting for him to explain, her heart beating fast. Her mind caught between hope and heartbreak. She wanted to believe in him, but she couldn't shake the doubt pressing. Against her chest, the night that had begun with quiet distance had just turned into something far more complicated. and Emily knew that whatever Daniel Logs said next would change everything between them. The room had gone silent. All eyes were fixed on Daniel as he stood between Emily and the woman who had just spoken. Emily's heart was pounding so loudly she could hear it in her ears. The music had stopped, glasses were half raised, and the glow of the chandelier above seemed too bright. No one knew what was happening, not even Emily. The woman's question still hung in the air. "Are you sure about this?" she had asked, her tone unsure, almost protective. Daniel took a slow breath, looked at her briefly, and then turned his full attention back to Emily. His face was calm but serious, and there was a deep sincerity in his eyes. "Yes," he said firmly, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm sure." He stepped closer to Emily, his voice softening but filled with emotion. "I know this might look strange," he said, his hand half raised as if to explain. "That's Emma, a colleague. She helped me plan this moment tonight." He paused, looking around the room. "I wanted to make things right, and she helped me keep it a surprise." The woman Emma gave a small, reassuring nod before quietly stepping back. A murmur of relief spread through the crowd, and soft laughter followed. The tension slowly began to fade. But Emily stood still, her chest still tight, not sure whether to smile or cry. Daniel's voice trembled slightly as he turned back to her. "Emily," he said, "you've been patient, kind, and stronger than I ever deserved. I've spent months buried in work, chasing goals that didn't matter half as much as you do. I forgot what it felt like to look at you and realize how lucky I am." The people around them fell silent again, but this time it was a quiet, filled with emotion, not confusion. Emily blinked back tears as Daniel went on. "When I saw you standing alone tonight," he continued, "I realized how far apart we've grown. And that's on me. I let life take over. I let silence replace our laughter. I let distance replace love. But I don't want that anymore." He took one step closer. "I want to bring us back to where we started, to the reason I fell in love with you. You've always been the heart of my world, even when I was too lost to say it." A few people in the crowd sniffled softly. Someone whispered, "That's beautiful," and another whispered, "He's lucky." Emily's eyes glistened with tears. She hadn't expected this. The man who had been quiet for months was suddenly standing in front of her, saying the words she had been longing to hear. Her throat tightened, and she struggled to find her voice. Daniel took a deep breath and held out his hand. "So tonight," he said gently in front of everyone who knows us, "I want to ask for another chance. May I have this dance?" For a moment, she didn't move. The music had stopped, but the DJ seemed to sense the moment and quietly played a soft, romantic song, one of those timeless melodies that made people pause and listen. Emily stared at Daniel's outstretched hand. It was the same hand that had once held hers on their wedding day, trembling with joy. The same hand that had built their home, their life, and their quiet routines. She wanted to take it, but a part of her hesitated. What if this was just guilt? What if it was only a grand gesture meant to fix something that couldn't be fixed in one night? She swallowed hard, torn between her heart and her doubt. Around her, the crowd waited silently, breath held. Then, slowly, she placed her hand in his dot. The applause that followed was soft but heartfelt. Daniel smiled faintly, as if relieved, and guided her toward the center of the room. The lights dimmed a little, leaving them in a warm golden glow as the music played. Daniel placed one hand gently on her waist, the other still holding hers. Emily felt her heartbeat slow, her body relaxing into the moment. It felt strange, familiar yet fragile, like stepping into a memory she thought was gone. Neither of them spoke at first. The sound of the music and the faint hum of whispers around them filled the silence. After a while, Daniel leaned closer and whispered, "I've missed this. I've missed you." Emily blinked back a tear. "Then why did you stop trying?" She whispered back. Daniel's eyes softened. "I thought I was doing it all for us, working late, pushing harder. I thought success would make you proud. But I see now that all you ever wanted was time, not things." Emily looked up at him, her voice trembling. "You could have just told me that you were struggling. I would have understood, I know. he said, his voice low. But I let pride get in the way. I thought I had to fix everything alone. And in doing that, I almost broke the best thing I ever had. The honesty in his words pierced through her doubts. It wasn't just a show, he truly meant it. His voice carried regret, but also hope. Like a man trying to rebuild what he had once taken for granted. As they danced, the room faded away. The lights, the music, the people, everything blurred into a soft golden haze. Emily felt something shift inside her, something fragile but real. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was the beginning of it. Daniel brushed his thumb gently across her hand. "You look beautiful tonight," he said, almost in a whisper. She smiled faintly. "You haven't said that in a while." "I should have said it every day," he replied. They moved slowly, letting the rhythm guide them. Around them, guests watched quietly, touched by the intimacy of the moment. It wasn't a dramatic scene. It was simple, raw, and full of quiet emotion. By the time the song ended, Emily's eyes were wet, and Daniel's face was soft with relief. The crowd clapped again, some smiling, others dabbing their eyes. Daniel squeezed her hand gently and said, "Thank you." "For what?" she asked quietly. "For still being here," he said. "For not giving up on me." She looked up at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just don't make me wait for words like this again." Daniel nodded, his eyes glistening. "You won't have to." For the first time in months, she believed him. As the next song began and the chatter picked up again, Emily rested her head lightly on his shoulder. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for now, she felt something she thought she had lost: peace. The night that had begun with silence and doubt had turned into something else entirely. A reminder that love, when fought for, could still find its way back. But deep down, as she looked up at Daniel, Emily couldn't shake one final thought sometimes. Love needed to be tested to prove it was still alive. And tonight, under the soft lights and the gaze of everyone who witnessed it, their love had just taken its first breath again. Applause echoed through the ballroom as the song faded. Emily and Daniel stood in the center of the floor, their hands still joined, their eyes locked in a quiet exchange of emotion that words couldn't fully carry. The moment fell heavy and soft at once, like something old breaking open to let something new begin. Around them, guests smiled, whispered, and slowly returned to their conversations, leaving the two of them in a small golden bubble of stillness. Emily didn't know what to say. Her heart was full, but also cautious. What Daniel had just done, the speech, the dance, the public confession, had caught her completely off guard. She could still feel the echo of his words in her chest, but she also knew that one night couldn't undo months of distance. Still, she couldn't deny the warmth in his eyes. It had been missing for so long that seeing it again felt like seeing sunlight after a long winter. Daniel looked at her gently, his voice low. "I didn't mean to embarrass you," he said. Emily shook her head. "You didn't. I just wasn't expecting any of this." He gave a faint smile. "That was the point. You've always done everything quietly for me. Tonight, I wanted everyone to know how much you matter." She wanted to believe every word. She wanted to trust that this wasn't just guilt or an impulsive gesture. "Why now, Daniel?" she asked softly. He paused, his eyes dropping for a second before meeting hers again. "Because I realized how close I was to losing you," he said honestly. "When I saw you standing alone tonight, I saw how far I'd let things go. I couldn't live with that. I don't want to just be a husband in name, Emily. I want to be the man who loves you out loud again." Her throat tightened. For a moment, she couldn't speak. The sincerity in his tone, the way his voice cracked slightly at the end, it didn't sound rehearsed. It sounded real. Daniel took a small step closer, lowering his voice. "I didn't plan to speak tonight. The words just came out. I've been carrying them for months." Emily searched his face for any sign of hesitation, but saw none. He looked tired, maybe even scared, but his eyes were clear, honest. "You really caught everyone off guard," she said softly, managing a small laugh. He smiled, finally exhaling a little. "Including myself." A waiter passed by offering drinks. Daniel took 2 glasses of sparkling cider and handed one to her. "To us," he said quietly. "To starting over, if you'll let me." Emily hesitated before clinking her glass gently against his. "Starting over takes more than one dance, Daniel." "I know," he replied, "but I'm willing to earn every step." Shh. They both took a sip, the air between them lighter now. As they moved toward a quieter corner of the ballroom, the lights dimmed again and another slow song began. Couples filled the floor. Laughter, soft conversation, and the clinking of glasses filled the air. For the first time that night, Emily felt her chest loosen. Maybe it wasn't about fixing everything tonight. Maybe it was about taking the first step. She turned to Daniel. "You really planned this with Emma?" He nodded. "I wanted to surprise you. I asked her to help me find the right words, make sure I didn't make a fool of myself." Emily chuckled softly. "You didn't. You just made everyone in the room cry." "Good," he said with a grin. "I almost cried myself." That made her laugh, a small, genuine sound that Daniel hadn't heard in months. He looked at her as if that laugh alone was proof that everything he had done tonight was worth it. For a few moments, they stood side by side watching the crowd. The tension that had once separated them had softened into something fragile but hopeful. Emily's mind replayed everything that had happened, the woman's question, Daniel's speech, the dance, and even though part of her was still trying to process it, her heart felt lighter. Daniel reached for her hand again, his voice gentle. "I know I've said this before, but I mean it now. I don't want to let us fade away. I'm done hiding behind work. I miss coming home to you, not just to our house." Emily turned toward him, her expression thoughtful. "I want to believe you. But promises are easy to make, Daniel. Keeping them takes effort. I'll show you," he said. "Not just tonight, but every day. No more excuses, no more forgetting what matters." She looked down at their joined hands. "I hope you mean that." "I do," he said simply. "You're my best decision, Emily. I forgot how lucky I am to be loved by you. I don't ever want to take that for granted again." The honesty in his tone broke down the last of her defenses. She blinked back tears and gave a soft nod. "Then let's see where this goes." Daniel smiled. Not the confident, charming smile he showed others, but a smaller, humble one. "That's all I ask." The music changed again, and this time Emily was the one who stepped closer first. They began to dance slowly, quietly, almost like no one else existed. Daniel's hand rested on her back, his touch familiar yet new, careful but certain. Emily closed her eyes and let herself lean into the rhythm around them. The party carried on laughter, chatter, flashes from cameras. But for the two of them, the rest of the world had blurred away. It was just their story now, imperfect, but still alive. When the song ended, Daniel didn't let go right away. He looked down at her and whispered, "Thank you for not walking away from me tonight." Emily smiled faintly. "You didn't give me a chance to. Would you have?" he asked softly. She paused, thinking. "Maybe, but not now." He smiled, relief washing over his face. "Then I guess I did something right." Later that night, when the crowd began to thin and the lights dimmed further, Emily and Daniel walked outside together. The air was cool, the city lights still bright. He offered her his jacket, and she accepted it, pulling it around her shoulders. They stood quietly for a moment, watching cars pass. "You know," she said softly, "for a long time I thought we were past saving." Daniel turned to her. "Maybe we were just waiting for the right moment to try again." She nodded, her eyes on the skyline. "You really scared me tonight." "In a good way, I hope," he said with a small smile. "A little of both," she admitted. Laughing lightly, Daniel reached for her hand again, holding it firmly. "Then let's make sure next time I only surprise you with good things." Emily looked up at him, her expression softening. "I'll hold you to that." They stood in silence for a while, just breathing in the cool night air. The tension, the pain, the long months of distance, they hadn't vanished, but something new had taken their place, understanding. The first spark of something worth rebuilding. As they walked toward their car, Daniel glanced at her and said, "I know we have a long way to go, but tonight reminded me that love doesn't disappear. It just waits for us to find it again." Emily smiled as she looked ahead, the soft hum of the city around them. Then maybe tonight was our reminder. And as they drove home under the quiet glow of the streetlights, Emily leaned back in her seat, a small smile tugging at her lips. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was sitting beside a stranger. She was sitting beside her husband, and though the night had been full of surprises, the biggest one was this: love had found its way back to them when she least expected it.